election of Donald Trump as the 47th president of the United States spelled doom for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. There has been so much talk that Trump will deport Prince Harry or maybe reveal some details about his visa status that the Biden administration perhaps helped him hide, allegedly. But I actually have an interesting and perhaps maybe a bit of a different perspective because there was actually something that was revealed last night with a, you could call, commentator that demonstrated a huge gaping hole in Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's narratives. There's also a lot of problems within the media, within the celebrity space in Hollywood that all spells, I think, really bad things for Harry and Meghan and how they completely and totally bet on the wrong horse. They decided to go to the United States, try to make it in Hollywood, and they really failed to do that in multiple ways. And this election is revealing, I think, so much about where sort of Americans stand on particular issues. Now, we will not get into the politics. That is not part of this channel at all. But I just find some of this stuff really, really fascinating because the world in which Harry and Meghan live is a bubble, and that bubble has been effectively burst. And the air was already seeping out before, but now it's a huge, gaping, smashing hole. I think it's actually entirely exploded. And where does this leave the couple? I don't think in a particularly good place, to be quite honest. So we are going to go into this today. But if you guys haven't been to Royal News Network before, hello, my name is Brittany. I provide a compelling royal commentary. So if you guys want to hit that subscribe button, I would absolutely love to have you back. This has obviously been a long day, you could say, for many Americans. I was up until 3 in the morning. I kept waiting for them to officially call things because everything looked like it was stacking a particular way. And legacy media kept dragging their feet about it. So I just kept waiting and waiting and waiting. And then I watched part of Trump's acceptance speech and everything. And so I was like, oh, okay. And then I went to bed. So I am a little tired, but I did want to shout out Ana Lucia Diamonds today. You guys, I'm still sporting the 2 studs here. I got my 2 carat and my cluster diamond earring. Just love these. So amazing. And then also, I just wanted to share my gorgeous cross here. I just absolutely love this thing. Catherine has something similar. And as especially we're heading towards Christmas, if you're interested in something like this, Ana Lucia has some great stuff. They're all lab created diamonds. They also just introduced their own diamond jewelry cleaner. Very, very fancy and lovely. So I'm like actually looking at it in the monitor rather than looking in the camera like I should because it's just so pretty. So it's a great piece and it actually functions. Functionality in great pieces, like that's just, you can't ask for much more. So if you guys are interested in any of that, use code ROYAL20 to save 20%. I will put a link up above and down below as well. Okay, guys, back to the election. Now, I don't know where you guys stand politically, and that's totally fine because this is more about sort of a broader picture situation here. Because as Harry and Meghan live here in the United States and continue to attempt to be cosplay royals here, I feel like at least some of that because of Meghan Markle's sort of obvious leanings towards the left, that's been sort of indulged. And I think that gravy train is about to end because I don't think anybody in the Trump camp really wants to support them sort of willy-nilly doing whatever they want. Now, does this mean Prince Harry will be deported? No, it won't. I know a lot of people are asking for that, interested in that. I just don't think that's going to happen now. Will he perhaps have his visa application officially revealed by the Trump administration just to go, we know there's questions here. We don't really care enough to hide it. Just have a field day. I could definitely see that being a possibility, but there are bigger fish to fry here. But again, number one for Harry and Meghan in this whole election is that the visa issue will come up, I think. I think it will come up at some point, especially if they don't stay in their lane. If Harry and Meghan do the smart thing, which is just be business people, stop flaunting your royal titles, stop throwing around whatever minimal royal influence you have, stop trying to be the prince and princess of the United States in their own deluded minds, they'll be fine. They'll really be fine. If you offer innovation and skill sets and those have talents and those sorts of things, I can't think of any of those things that Harry and Meghan really encompass. They will be just fine. Just do your business, contribute to the economy, and things will chug along pretty well. I think the trouble for Harry and Meghan with the visa situation is that if they sort of overindulge themselves too much and get high on their own supply, they may run into some pretty big problems somewhere down the line. So I know so many of you guys have said Harry will be deported, there'll be investigations, yada, yada, yada. I just don't see that happening. I think there are much bigger issues on the stage here in the United States for the new administration to tackle. And I'd rather prefer their focus to be on rather than Harry and Meghan. But again, Harry and Meghan, it only works so if Harry and Meghan also do their part and not cause a fuss. That's going to be sort of difficult for them. So I just wanted to get the visa issue out of the way because I know I get a lot of questions on that. And I did want to have you all listen here really quick to Eric Trump's comments on Harry and Meghan because he did share some of his thoughts. So go ahead and take a listen right here.
Truthfully, I don't give a damn about Prince Harry, and I don't think this country does either. I will say that, my father loved the Queen. And I think the monarchy is like an incredibly beautiful thing. He moved to the U.S. I'm not sure how well received he's been over here. He doesn't really exactly know, I don't think, where he is. But if you kind of cast him aside from that family, the family's been incredible. And so, and William, obviously, I don't think has really made a misstep. And yet you look at kind of, this one kind of black sheep led by, I think, a wife who's pretty unpopular, probably both here and over where you are. One of the most beautiful things in the UK is actually the monarchy and what it stands for and what it symbolizes and this family. And it's gorgeous. So I don't give a damn if he did drugs, if he did what. It means nothing. But I can tell you my father and our entire family has tremendous respect for the monarchy.
All right, guys, it sounds like it's pretty much a settled issue. We'll see where it goes. But I don't see this being high on the list. But, it is somewhat problematic for Harry and Meghan. The other big problem, though, I see with the outcome of this election is how hard Hollywood went for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and how that didn't move the needle at all. It didn't move the needle at all for them. And so what does this mean for the couple? Well, I think a big reflection on it is that there's sort of an overall diminishing star power within Hollywood. Yeah, yes, there are still stars in Hollywood. A lot of people in the entertainment space have talked about the death of the movie star. And what they mean by that is that it's no longer an individual person's name who gets you in the seat of a theater at a particular time. They say sort of the last maybe movie star is Tom Cruise, where his name carries the film. Like you used to go to Arnold Schwarzenegger films. You used to go to, let's say, Angelina Jolie films. Trying to think of a woman there in that situation, or Sigourney Weaver films, or George Clooney films. Although I think there's a question about how much George Clooney was actually a movie star. Maybe Jack Nicholson would be a better example. There are particular actors solely having their name attached to the project carries the film. That's no longer the case anymore. Because with the advent, I think, of social media and just the 24/7 news cycle that we have, there was a critical flaw in the Hollywood machine, which is that we actually got to know the stars. And as we got to know these stars more and more, we liked them less and less. And I believe I would say sort of the majority, or maybe silent majority, you could say, were like increasingly turned off by the Hollywood crowd because they increasingly revealed themselves to, I think, be out of touch with the average American, average person, out of touch with the average sentiments and all these sorts of issues. I think Hollywood revealed themselves to be. And so that is obviously a huge gaping problem for them because in order to sell projects, names have to be attached to them. And then you combine the loss of the Hollywood star with the collapsing box office viewership overall of American created entertainment. So what I mean by that is that when it comes to American films, American TV shows, they are on the decline. You know what a lot of people are watching on Netflix? K-dramas, C-dramas. So that's Chinese dramas, Korean dramas, Japanese dramas. They're watching foreign properties more in some instances than American ones. And the reason for that is the overall decline, I think, in the quality of an American entertainment because it went so woke, so DEI that it became unwatchable. They have to fit into all these metrics. And what this does is that it stifles creativity and it kills art in many ways. It kills art because you can't create an authentic story anymore because you have to check 1,000 boxes to get it greenlit in the first place. And once you put all that gobbledygook together, as it turns out, it doesn't really work. And we've seen this reflected in the decline of viewership overall. The most streamed platform in the world is YouTube because you could argue people like me, Taz, Murky Meg, others have become a form of entertainment. And we are now competing with the Hollywood machine. And this is a really, really big problem because Hollywood spends millions upon millions, billions of dollars creating content that they can no longer sell. And what Netflix did, which I would argue was incredibly stupid, and yes, they were throwing deals out willy nilly at the time, was that they decided to put potentially upwards of $100 million into Harry and Meghan with the purpose of getting content that they could sell. But as it turns out, they're pretty crappy at it. And so they failed at pretty much everything. I would argue all their documentaries were subpar. The only reason the one did well, that was the Harry and Meghan named one, did well because of the inside glimpse it gave into the royal family. No other reason did that thing perform well. And nothing else they performed well did well either. And we obviously had the Polo documentary coming up in December. We don't even have a trailer for that yet. I mean, does anybody give a crap? I would say probably no. And I don't see that doing well. I don't think see Meghan Markle's cooking show doing exceptionally well because the other thing that comes into effect with all this stuff regarding entertainment is that people are craving authenticity, and that's the one thing Hollywood can't really sell anymore. They're very inauthentic and people are craving that authenticity. And so because of that, when it comes to Harry and Meghan, especially Meghan, she doesn't really have an authentic bone in her body. She is very, very contrived. And you feel it. You really, really feel it. So when Meghan Markle tries to be, all sweet and innocent and that, or, crying, going, nobody asked me if I'm okay. And I'm like, you live in a palace with servants and one of the most famous families in the entire world. And your like gripe is that nobody's asked you if you're okay. Give me a break. It doesn't really come across as well anymore. And Meghan Markle keeps trying the same playbook and it's becoming a worse and worse outcome for her. And the collapse of Hollywood's ability to sway diddly squat in the election. And I don't think they could have swayed much anyways, but I think people are increasingly turned off by the industry itself because of the actors' activism. Yes, you can have an opinion, but sometimes it's best not to be super vocal about it or basically call half your audience, you could say garbage. That doesn't tend to, obviously, that wasn't an actor, but that tends to turn people off. And so, because of that, I think there has been an overall collapse in Hollywood and celebrity. And that's what Harry and Meghan have tied themselves to is Hollywood and celebrity. Hollywood itself is actually massively downsizing because productions are not happening there anymore because DEI killed the industry. So they're going to other countries that don't have those same level of regulations to make more content. And because of that, Harry and Meghan, whatever they might be trying to do, well, there's no real infrastructure there for them to utilize. They were supposed to do a movie television show, I don't know which they were going to end up doing, called Meet Me at the Lake. And that was their one scripted series. It seems like that's effectively dead. I mean, we have had happy talk from Netflix going, yeah, they're working on stuff. They're working on stuff. I think that deal is dead. I think that deal is dead. And the whole thing is the industry itself is dying. They've tied themselves to a dying industry and they cannot right the ship and turn things around. Well, they're trying to, they're going to be entrepreneurs, property managers, and a philanthropist. I feel like in some ways none of those are real jobs. I mean, I know they are, but they aren't. Especially philanthropist is that's not a real job. That is something people do when they have enough money to be a philanthropist. When it comes to the entrepreneurship, so far I've seen Meghan Markle make one horrific business decision after another. I mean, all you had to do is look at ARO, her investment portfolio. It's all, I think, pretty bad. And because of that, I don't think it's going to result in a lot of dividends. They have a property investment now in Portugal that they're supposedly going to rent out as an Airbnb, but it's $5 million. You're going to have to charge a lot for rent. And granted, you might be able to do that. But if that whole neighborhood ends up being sort of an Airbnb place, you're going to be competing with everyone else. Your margins might be lower because your property overall is more expensive. I mean, there could be a lot of issues there that I don't think they're necessarily thinking of. It just doesn't sound like actually a very smart investment, to be quite honest. I think there are better investments to make than that. And yes, it could produce like a steady income stream, but it could be much better too. And it's just not one of those things. It just seems so weird. If Royals running an Airbnb, it just seems super duper odd. And yes, there are actually properties on royal portfolios. I think there's a specific place in the Isles of Sicily in the UK that William can rent out or whatever. But I just think it just is kind of like that's the best you guys got is one property that you're going to rent out as an Airbnb. That's all you have, really? Really? It just doesn't sound like, again, a very strong business plan. And the other problem that we see with this election is sort of the death of the legacy media. What is rising and having a lot more impact instead of the mainstream outlets like ABC, NBC, CBS is stuff online. And this affects Harry and Meghan as well. Because what the legacy media does, and I see this from time to time, is like they'll talk up a Meghan Markle outfit. She looks stunning. She looks gorgeous. And yes, of course, there are people who think that. But when it comes to the red dress of doom, I think a lot of other people look at that going, that's not a stunning look. Her hair looks awful. The fit of that dress is horrific. The construction of that dress is horrific. She doesn't look particularly good. She's acting weird. And this is something, of course, I've seen on the Daily Mail, and it's just sort of how they write things. But I think what is happening and what we're seeing is that the legacy media has less and less trust. And because of that, information is diversifying massively. What Harry and Meghan tried to do when they were in Colombia, which is sort of, you could say, a reflection of this decentralization of media, is that when they tried to centralize it, it didn't go well. Because what Harry and Meghan tried to do, and I think by extension, what a lot of the legacy media really likes to do, is control the narrative. So on the Colombian trip, Harry and Meghan had one reporter that came with them to every single engagement, pretty much. And that was a woman from Harper's Bazaar. Took me a second. I was like, Marie Claire L, which was it? Harper's Bazaar. And this woman was tasked with writing down what she could and sharing it with other news outlets. Other news outlets looked at this, looked at her, looked at it, looked at her again, and goes, we can't use it. There is nothing here. And Harry and Meghan were like, well, too bad, so sad. Love, Dad. This is what you're getting. That was, I would argue, a big problem here is that Harry and Meghan tried to control the media so badly that it backfired massively. And you got more stories out of their lack of transparency than you did the actual tour itself. And that is a problem because people don't believe much of the mainstream outlet anymore. Because you even saw it with this reporter. She was gushing about how wonderful and lovely and amazing Harry and Meghan were. Now, while I imagine she had a good experience, this was before we got additional bullying allegations out of Harry and Meghan's office. We also know there's just generally a lot of tension there. So it's like hard to imagine. It's like, so was it really all that wonderful, amazing? Or are you just saying it so you can maintain access? I found this even in other outlets in Europe, that some of the, you could say, more legacy media pieces in certain countries won't cover certain aspects of the royal family. Like an example outside the UK would be Crown Prince Frederick at the time. Now he is King Frederick. He went with a friend to her apartment and seemingly spent the night there. Now, obviously, you can ask whatever questions you want about what happened. We don't know the true details, but it didn't look particularly good for him to have gone and done that. And as I understand it, now you could correct me if I'm wrong, some of the mainstream outlets in Denmark never covered the story because they didn't want to lose the royal access. And I think sometimes people get scared of that. But because of the decentralization of media, people call them out for different things. Though I will say, I think there's a lot of inaccurate narratives about Harry and Meghan out there. I see them from time to time, somebody posting, oh, Meghan's filed for divorce. Oh, Harry's filed for the divorce. And they have no citations. They're like, oh, TMZ is reporting it, but there's no TMZ citation. That kind of stuff drives me bonkers. If you have a big story like that, you must cite it. Now, granted, there are times when you get little tips. I've had a tip that I shared that was true. And I did that because I trusted the source and I wanted to share it. But, you have to have a bit of caveat because you never know what will happen. But the media doesn't do and cover some of those things like they used to. And that's what Harry and Meghan want. Harry and Meghan are not against the media necessarily. They're against the media that questions their narrative. And that's what we all do on this platform and others, is that we question the narrative. And that's what incenses them. It's not that we cover them. Meghan Markle loves all coverage. I truly do believe that. In many ways, she thrives on it. But she hates it when somebody questions her. That's what she has an issue with. We all, in her mind, should just be automatons that follow her around like she's a Pied Piper and she's telling us all these amazing things, how wonderful she is. And we're just supposed to clap happily and tell her how wonderful she is. I think that's the way Meghan Markle thinks the public should behave. And if it was a different time and there was, you could say, a more centralized media, she might have actually achieved that. But because of the lack of trust in the mainstream media, which is the result of a variety of different issues, She doesn't have that. And so there's all these people questioning her. And I think many people have speculated, and I think this is true, that last night the decision was sort of an indictment on the legacy media in addition to the previous administration. That is what sort of some of the ire was towards, is that people are tired of the media calling half the country various things and not really caring about the impact of that. I even saw this. I apologize for the language of this map. I even saw this map somebody posted, which is actually inaccurate to the final electoral college count. And I was like, does that really help matters to share a map like this? Because it doesn't really help anything. Now, granted, this isn't from the media directly, but I imagine the media somewhat feels this way. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, because we should all reflect that sometimes that people have different opinions and perspectives on things. But it shouldn't be sort of this denigration of people who you don't like or don't appreciate their perspective. I think that's sort of a bad way to go about things. And then we get to, I think, the crucial issue here. And this is one I caught on to, I want to say a month or two ago. I don't keep track of all the pro Harry Meghan accounts, but there's a couple of people, and one of them in particular who I don't cover very much is Christopher Bosie. And I did a members only video on him, and I might do something more. But when it comes to Christopher, I was looking at his post and realizing he kept posting Florida's going to turn blue. Florida's going to turn blue. There's going to be a blue wave, and it's going to be a landslide for Kamala and everything. And I'm like, okay, but like, if you're wrong, then you're really, really wrong. And he was really, really wrong. Trump, in fact, carried Florida by 1.5 million votes. I think he even won Miami-Dade County, which usually leans left. And so to get that county is huge. Now, to be fair, Christopher Bosie said, unlike other analysts, I can admit when I am wrong. Florida was catastrophic and it wasn't close. The ballot measures had no effect and NPA voters broke for Trump. So yeah, he was wrong. Like, really, really wrong. So my question becomes, because he was so incredibly wrong and he was so staunchly that I am going to be right. And so let's look at a couple of what he said. He said, tomorrow, the first Black female president will be elected over 300 electoral votes. A bunch of delusional MAGA bettors will go through some things, and Evan Power will rage quit Twitter when Florida flips blue. So let it be written. So let it be done. Did any of that happen? No. No, none of that happened. We also had this one. I just found out Republican officials in Florida hate me. My response to that is Florida is in play. Maybe they didn't hate you. Maybe they thought they just found you annoying or something. I don't know. On election day when Florida flips, some of you who have been talking SHIT behind my back better not slide into my DMs. Act like you don't know me. I don't know if they're sliding into your DMs now because you were like really, really wrong. This one's really good. This is from August. I can't wait to go on my I Told You So tour in 69 days. VP Harris will win Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina. She did not win a single one of them. Just saying. Told you guys on Sunday, this is not like anything we have seen before. Yeah, you were really, really wrong. Now, of course, we can all be wrong. Of course, we can all read the tea leaves wrong and everything like that. That can 100% happen. And he did apologize for it. So kudos to him, because that's not always easy thing to do. But because he was so incredibly wrong, it raises a lot of interesting questions, because he was even interviewed on Harry and Meghan's documentary, telling all of us about the online hate they receive and how it's some sort of calculated smear campaign and everything like that. When my supposition has always been people at some point sort of woke up or decided they didn't really like Meghan Markle and wanted to share about it, because I certainly have not coordinated with anyone. Have I talked with people? Yes. Do we coordinate something? No. I mean, other people might, I don't know, but I'm not part of any sort of coordination, nor would I be, to be quite honest. I'm not really into coordinating in that way, because I see this as a news outlet. So because I see it as a news outlet, I prefer talking about all the news. Like some people have said, well, don't share the Prince William story about the bad condition of some of the houses in the Duchy of Cornwall. I'm like, no, it's news. It's being reported by good outlets. It's news. I talk about it. Not one of those people who's like willing to hide something. That's not really my jam. And I don't cover everything. Maybe I don't cover everything right or something like that, but I always try to leave a caveat in case I'm wrong. I mean, because I did say that Harry and Meghan wouldn't make it 5 years, although in my estimation, I think they were starting to have probably big problems last year. That's just my theory. I don't really know. And I always call it a theory. He was very hardcore that Florida was going to turn blue. And it really, really didn't. In fact, I think even the Senate race went to a Republican and all these sorts of things. So, why does that matter? Because when you make such a huge part of what you're saying, this one particular thing, and it doesn't happen, I wonder what your sources are, what metrics you were using. How in the world did you come to such a ridiculous conclusion that was so ridiculously wrong? And the only reasons I can come up with is that your information was either really, really bad or you had a case of confirmation bias, is that you saw something that in your mind thought you was like, okay, this is going to go this way and yada, 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 when you really didn't have any good metrics to back that up. And I sort of think that's what happened here. Now, I can't say totally in the case of Harry and Meghan, but if you're wrong here, you're probably wrong on them too. And that I think busts a massive hole in Harry and Meghan's narrative. It wasn't this huge, massive, calculating smear campaign because people just hated Meghan Markle for no reason. No, I think what happened is that naturally over time, the audience that went, "Hey, there's something I don't like about Meghan Markle. Are there other people who feel the same way?" Oh my gosh, there are. Well, I want to add my 2 cents in too. I think it was an organic thing. I don't think it was this some sort of huge thing that a couple people created and just went with or whatever. Cause like, why? That doesn't really happen. That's sort of I mean, it does happen. Let me be clear, that does sort of happen, but in this case, I think this was just simply a massive reaction to somebody who read to the rest of the world, or at least a good portion of the world, as inauthentic, problematic, toxic. And that's where the anti Megan sentiment came from. It wasn't this unnatural thing. I think it was a natural outcome of Meghan Markle's behavior. And although obviously the outcome of the Florida results is not a one-to-one comparison with this stuff on Harry and Meghan, I do totally understand that. But it reveals to me somebody who maybe sometimes doesn't have the best metrics or information and decides to go with it anyways, and then ends up looking really, really red faced in the process. Because I remember seeing these things come through and I was like, you know what? I'm going to start screenshotting some of this stuff because if he's wrong, then number one, he might delete some of his previous posts. But number two, it sort of reveals that he can't totally be a trusted source. And Harry and Meghan utilized him as a very trusted source in their documentary. And I think this demonstrates that he really is not. Now, granted, he might have some good thoughts and stuff, but I've always been of the perspective is if you really go really, really hardcore on one singular argument. I know some people are really, really focused on the possibility of Meghan and Harry using surrogates. I get it. I don't agree with it, but people have gone with that. If you put all your eggs in that basket and then you are wrong, any other argument you've made can also probably be deemed wrong because it might not seem like that way, but when your judgment goes a particular way and it's just so off, the judgment on everything comes into question. And of course, you guys can hold me to the same standard. Did I go too hard on something and it turned out not to be true? Then you can question what I'm saying. I always encourage my audience to question. Question is so good and important. I do not behoove anyone for questioning, doing their own research, and coming to their own conclusions, as I think that's a really, really healthy thing to do. But I will say, when it comes to surrogacy, I actually feel like not going into the conspiracy theories will actually play out better in some ways, because if it turns out Harry and Meghan did use one, if you were always on the surrogacy train, yes, you can claim victory. However, I also can claim victimhood because I was told something, I believed something because it made sense at the time, and it was something that is very, you could say, non-conspiratorial, and Harry and Meghan lied. So you can actually claim victimhood on the other end, which is just an interesting thought to consider. But I hope you guys see it's one of those things when it comes to looking at information. How do you evaluate it? Is somebody pretty consistent across the board and maybe they have a flub or time or two, which is perfectly understandable. We are all human. Or does somebody have a really, really strong argument they're trying to make that is really like sort of makes no sense, and then they fail massively with it? I think you should call a lot of the rest of the things they've said into question. That is just my thought on that. So, guys, although I think this election is probably not going to be totally good news for Harry and Meghan, especially because I think we know probably who Meghan Markle was backing. Overall, though, I think in terms of the visa issue, they'll be just fine. But guys, they've got a lot of problems coming their way because I think some of the tides in some ways are turning and people are having a bit of a different perspective on things. So, guys, let me know what you think of this video. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful and amazing day, and I shall see you again very, very soon. Bye.